Marlonnet has repeatedly pandered to the most base of human qualities, intolerance and prejudice. He is derogatory and divisive. He derides those of opposing views and strident and obnoxious put-downs. He is the congressional equivalent of a name-calling schoolyard bully.
Women's Voices polled women and found jobs and economy top the list of what worries women the most.
404, a nonpartisan vote. 404 representatives in this nation voted for funding Head Start because they know it's a way to curb poverty, one of the most effective ways to break the chain. Ron Marlonnet was one of those 14 unenlightened individuals who can't see his way to provide support for our children and to change their lifestyles forever.
The middle class can't really afford medical care anymore. Even working people with deductibles of $500 per person cannot afford medical care anymore. Ron Marlonnet was absolutely opposed to changing health care.
Ron Marlonnet is trying to turn the arts into dirty business. And he is trying to make this campaign the mother of all dirty campaigns.
He voted against the Family Leave Bill. Unfortunately, many tribal people, tribal women, are single parents who have to vote. I think a family value is when you set priorities and your family comes first, your children come first, you should be able to take care of your children.
People magazine, which is not normally a political magazine, has a select group of 8 that they call the enemies of the earth. Ron Marlonnet is the only House or Senate member to make that list for voting against nearly every environmental issue introduced into Congress. We're going to cover several issues today, but I'd like to start by reading a portion of the Moms Against Marlonnet's statement written by Susan Donnelly that I think so aptly describes why we are here today. For his own political gain, Ron Marlonnet has repeatedly pandered to the most base of human qualities, intolerance and prejudice. He is derogatory and divisive. He derides those of opposing views and strident and obnoxious put-downs. He is the congressional equivalent of a name-calling schoolyard bully. We fail to see how such a man can possibly represent the multiplicity of views of Montanans. It is surely true that most loggers love the woods. It is surely true that drilling crews want clean air and water for their children. The problems Montana faces... Sorry, I lost my place. The problems Montana faces are not as simple as Ron Marlonnet would like us to believe. It's not a case of the working man against the prairie fairies. We believe that our children deserve better than this type of leadership, that Montana deserves better than this. And we intend to see that Ron Marlonnet does not continue to be a political obstacle in the way of long-term solutions to our pressing social and economic problems. Our children need to be taught that they can live in harmony with all forms of life on our planet, including people with other beliefs. Our children need to have hope. They need to know that seeming conflicts between the preservation of the environment and the development of business and technology can be resolved. Our children need to know that they can work within the political framework of our Constitution and the legal system. And with that, I'm going to introduce our first speaker, Maggie Jobst, and I'm going to let the speakers introduce themselves.
Welcome. I'm Maggie Jobst, a member of the United Professional and Office Workers Union. You, pal, you. Local number 427. And I want to add the voice of working women to the cry of outrage at Ron Marlonnet. Women's Voices polled women and found jobs and economy top the list of what worries women the most. We as women live lives marked by change, by stress, and also by satisfaction. We have one foot firmly planted in our homes and our families, and we have the other foot planted in the workplace. We deserve decent jobs. We deserve decent wages. We deserve training. We deserve equality, and we deserve equal pay. A majority of women say they have fallen behind economically this past year. It is economics that are keeping us down and from equality. Of the 500 most popular jobs, 480 are dominated by men, 20 by women, and they are at the bottom of the pay scale. Legislation is keeping us from equality. Let's vote Ron out for voting against us. Economics, that's the money in your pocket, in my pocket, in your pocket, takes power from us as women. It's what creates low self-esteem. It keeps us downtrodden. It keeps us from controlling our own lives, and therefore the lives of our children and those children and our grandchildren. It's money. Ron Marlene, though his political party lays claim to support family values, voted against. He voted against the Family and Medical Leave Act. Couldn't believe it. He voted against funding Head Start. He voted against the Civil Rights and Women's Equality and Employment Act of '91. He voted against safety in the workplace issues. He voted against American jobs and notice of plant closings and mass layoffs. He also voted against funding school lunch programs. That's the breakfast and the lunch of our most helpless and needy population, our kids. Try teaching grade school as I did and tell a hungry child, Ron says no milk for you. In contrast, Ron voted for such things as the private sector lie detector testing of employees and applicants. He voted for billions, that's a capital B, of dollars for foreign aid. I work with women all the time who are trying to exist with their children and themselves on $4.25 an hour, minimum wage, and Ron voted against the raise to minimum wage. He wanted us lower economically than we are now. If you want a better life for your children, for your born and unborn grandchildren, for yourself, think of the votes against you, against your kittywinks, and vote for Pat Williams, who supports these same issues. Vote against Ron Marlene. Tell Ron, no more discrimination against working women, and send Marlene back to eastern Montana on his ranch. Thank you.
Our next speaker will be Vicky Cocciarella.
Hi, everybody. It's good seeing you all here. I want you to take note of my sign. Usually the word vote is a positive word, but in this respect, when we talk about Ron Marlene, we want to vote so that he doesn't victimize the women and children in our state anymore. And I'm talking to you today mostly about education, but I have many pages of pet peeves. First of all, and I think the previous speaker referred to the Head Start program, where he voted, one of 14 who voted against funding for Head Start. 404, a nonpartisan vote. 404 representatives in this nation voted for funding Head Start because they know it's a way to curb poverty, one of the most effective ways to break the chain. Ron Marlene was one of those 14 unenlightened individuals who can't see his way to provide support for our children and to change their lifestyles forever. Ron Marlene also voted against the Children with Disabilities Act and the Early Intervention Program for infants and toddlers in that act. That means that he doesn't care about kids who are hurt. That means that Ron Marlene is an oppressor. An oppressor means, or to oppress means, to keep down by cruel or unjust use of power. We're tired of him using his power to treat our children and the women in this state that way. Ron Marlene The T stands for tyrant. Tyrant means any person who exercises his authority in an oppressive way. We as women know what oppression means. But in this respect, he's a tyrant because he tried to dupe us. He tried to make us think that he believed in the Middle Income Student Assistance Act, which provides more federal funding for middle-income families. Right now in our country, the poor and the rich are the only ones who can afford to go to college. Pat Williams sponsored this legislation. Ron Marlenet voted for it, but when it came time to vote for the funding, which is the essence of the bill, Ron Marlenet voted no. So he speaks out of both sides of his mouth. And we hear his message. We know what he's saying. He can't fool any of us anymore. It's time to get rid of the tyrant. My pet peeve goes back to working women and the ad that you've seen on television. It comes down to his general philosophy about women, and he, in that ad, in a despicable way, uses the tragedy of his son's life to tell a melodrama and to tell how horribly he was treated by a woman, a woman working in the public sector, who told him, "I hope you don't have too much to do because we close at 4." Not knowing for sure the circumstances she works under, I would bet that she is reprimanded for working overtime, because we all know that funds have been cut by Marlenet's vote for public sector situations. In higher education right now, we only get a nickel for every dollar spent on education, when before the Bush and Reagan era we got a dime in Montana. But when it comes down to Ron using his son's tragedy, he takes his opportunity to blast the woman working in the public sector in our country. It's despicable. He uses women to his advantage as far as he's concerned to make a message that he doesn't want government to be the way it is. We don't want government to be the way it is under his leadership of oppression, victimization as a tyrant. Enough is enough. No more Ron. 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 Vote Ron out. Vote Ron out.
Thanks, Vicki. And our next speaker today is Nancy Fitch.
Good afternoon. I'm a family physician and I provide health care to women and children, and I am here today to just talk about my own personal experience a bit and why I'm opposed to Ron Marlenet. I have worked in family planning clinics, and I'm also a state employee, and we are operating on a shoestring budget and have hardly any resources at all right now to provide health care to women and children. I know that Ron Marlenet has opposed much legislation that would increase that funding and allow us to provide services better to women and children. So I want Ron out so that we can do a decent job and provide very needed services to women and children. Other speakers have detailed the legislation he has opposed. I would just like to talk about one other thing. About 3 years ago, I was visiting in Washington, D.C. and went to speak to both Pat Williams and Ron Marlenet about changing national health care means of delivery and health care legislation. I have for many years been very upset with the way medical care is delivered in this country because it is rationed right now. The middle class can't really afford medical care anymore. Even working people with deductibles of $500 per person cannot afford medical care anymore. Ron Marlenet was absolutely opposed to changing health care legislation in this country, and Pat Williams was very receptive to it. So I think in terms of our future ability for me to be able to deliver health care and for all Americans to have access to health care, we need to get Ron Marlenet out of Congress and vote Pat Williams in. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nancy. Our next speaker is Dana Broussard.
My name is Dana Boussard, and I'm a woman artist in Montana. Which city in the United States receives as much funding from the government for the arts as the city of Paris? The answer is no city. The answer is not all the cities combined in the United States receive as much money federally funded to the arts as the city of Paris. The truth, in fact, is that the entire budget for the National Endowment for the Arts is less than 0.02% of the total federal budget. The true experimental arts in this country are flailing because of it. The arts that are created in quiet spaces, in small towns, in cold lofts in big cities, and on the prairie, and on the cheap, are flailing and are in trouble. Quiet creation, the R&D of the arts, is what keeps the soul of this country alive and gives us hope for the future and must be supported by our government. We are so lucky to have as our congressman Pat Williams, a champion of the arts, a man who understands the value of a poem, and a man who understands the need to sit in a studio day after day, painting failed paintings with the hope that one day the breakthrough will come. And when it does, it is a chance for our country to see itself from a new perspective. Even though Ron Marlenet espouses to support the arts, and even occasionally votes for the NEA, the hypocrisy stands clearly when he calls up his friends, Pat Robertson and Reverend Wildman and the Christian Coalition, to come into Montana and to pointedly pick the NEA funding issue and unmercifully smear Pat Williams and call him Porno Pat and challenge his personal values and his religious values. Ron works very hard with the Christian Coalition to rupture and disintegrate any ability that the NEA could have to act as an effective arts organization. Together with the Christian Coalition, he has sent out across the state of Montana 10,000 mailers at taxpayers' expense, explicitly telling sexual projects. These have fallen into the hands of young children and their outraged mothers. Ron Marlenet is trying to turn the arts into dirty business. And he is trying to make this campaign the mother of all dirty campaigns. Marlenet and the Christian Coalition have conveniently twisted Pat's stand on the arts. And in one ad, the coalition warns that Williams wants to raise our taxes to pay for pornography. I'm shocked, Ron. I'm shocked by this diversion from the truth. Because I was in Washington, D.C. in 1990 for a week with Pat and other arts representatives, working tirelessly with him to come together and engineer a bipartisan compromise to renew the NEA funding and save that agency. The bill passed 342 to 58. Voters beware. Ron Marlenet has gathered together his Christian Coalition forces with their $13 million war chest. And even though his office has got a couple of elk biting themselves in bronze and a couple of benign landscapes hanging on the wall, do not be misled. His intolerance is unmatched. Support of the arts goes hand in hand with support of tolerant viewpoints. And Ron Marlenet is just not able to fit into that category. A congressman who espouses to support the arts must also be able to be tolerant and to allow an arts agency in his 25-year history fewer than 50 controversial grants out of 90,000. Marlenet's self-righteousness just can't allow him to do this. Do you want him to dictate to you what is arts? Think about it. No. Out with Marlenet.
My name is Rhonda Langford, and I'm here first of all because I'm a mom, and a mom that's opposed to Ron Marlenet. I have 3 daughters. In fact, I've got 2 of them right out in the audience today. I'm a mom, I'm a working woman who owns a small business, and I'm a wife, a farm wife. And I'm here because I believe that Montana is the last best place. I just thought you ought to know. I believe in family values. I believe in them very strongly, and my culture believes in family values. Some people don't respect my culture, and I don't believe respect family values. There was one incident that made me believe today I needed to be here. In 1989, when the Republican Convention, State Convention, took place in Montana, in Missoula, Ron Marlenet showed up with an arrow through his chest. On that same day, in the paper, one of our most elegant leaders, an elderly woman who opened her arms to the state, nationally, for people to come and to learn about our culture, had died. Her obituary was in there. That same day, on the front page, Ron Marlenet ridiculed the people that I care most about. That one hurt. It hurt bad, and it hurt a lot of people who considered this woman to be one of the elders and one of the mothers of a lot of tribal people. In the spirit of cooperation, tribal people have worked out cooperative agreements with the state of Montana in hopes to work a good working relationship throughout the state. Ron Marlenet has made statements that are very racist against tribal people. He has threatened at times to pull the purse strings if we didn't snap out of it. He has voted against appropriations for Indian housing. Since 1981, when the tribally controlled community colleges came about and asked for adequate funding, Ron Marlenet never voted for this. Our tribal people have told their children education is the tool to get out of poverty. If we don't have the means of education, we do not have the tools, or not armed with what we need to get out of the poverty that unfortunately tribal people have had the corner on. He's never assisted in any of the Indian health care's votes that came up, and in fact voted against them. He voted against the family leave bill. Unfortunately, many tribal people, tribal women, are single parents who have to vote. I think a family value is when you set priorities and your family comes first, your children come first, you should be able to take care of your children. I think that's family values to me. So, in my estimation, in order to keep this state for my kids to be the last best place, I think we need to vote Ron Marlenet out. I just thought you ought to know. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Leslie Jensen, and I'm the Vice President of your statewide pro-choice organization, Montana NARAW. I'm also a member of Missoula Pro-Choice, and I'm here to represent Montana's pro-choice constituency. I'm here to represent you. I too would like to address Ron Marlenet's voting record. In the last couple of years, in 1990 and 91, the U.S. Congress looked at 13 pieces of legislation that directly affected family planning and abortion availability. And I would like to highlight just a few of those pieces of legislation. How many of you out there knew that military women stationed overseas cannot get access to safe legal abortion at their military medical facility, nor can their dependents? This is a constitutional right that we have, reproductive freedom, and we can't, American women in the U.S. military do not have access to that right, even if they're going to pay for it with their own funds. That leaves them to attempt to seek out abortion services from whatever health care is available in the country in which they're serving. I think that's sick. In both 1990 and 91, the Congress tried to pass an amendment to this law that would allow American women to obtain abortion services from their military medical facilities. Pat Williams voted for this legislation. Ron Marlene voted against it. Unfortunately, it has not been successful. How many of you have heard of the gag rule? That's one of our favorite ones recently. That's been in the news a lot. Well, Ron Marlene has done several things to help Bush support the gag rule. And one of those things was to not help the U.S. Congress override President Bush's veto of an attempt to offset the effects of the gag rule. Pat Williams voted for this pro-choice piece of legislation, and Ron Marlene voted against it. Right now we have the Freedom of Choice Act going. That's an act in the U.S. Congress that is an attempt to codify Roe v. Wade. It's an attempt to uphold the tenets of Roe v. Wade. Pat Williams is a co-sponsor of that legislation. Ron Marlene is not a co-sponsor of that legislation. There's another piece of legislation out there that is really discriminatory and oppressive. It's called the Hyde Amendment, and it makes it such that women receiving Medicaid cannot get federal funding for an abortion. And what that effectively does is take away the abortion option for many poor women. That makes something that's a right only a right for those of us who can afford it. There has been an attempt made to amend that legislation. Pat Williams has voted for that, to amend that legislation to allow federal funding of abortion services for poor women. Ron Marlene has voted against that. In the final tally, if we look at all 13 pieces of legislation, I have to say, the pro-choice scoreboard shows Pat Williams at 100% voting pro-choice on all 13 pieces of legislation. It shows Ron Marlene voting against all 13 pieces of pro-choice legislation. Now, I don't know what team that guy is on, but I know he's not on my team. And I say, we got to get rid of him.
Okay, last but I hope not least, I'm Bryony Schwan, and I'm going to be talking on Ron Marlene's stand on the environment, which essentially is none. In fact, Ron Marlene was given a 0% voting position with the League of Conservation Voters for 1992. And Environmental Action, another organization from Washington, listed Ron Marlene on their Dirty Dozen list. People magazine, which is not normally a political magazine, has a select group of 8 that they call the enemies of the earth. Ron Marlene is the only House or Senate member to make that list for voting against nearly every environmental issue introduced into Congress. Fly and Rod magazine gave Ron Marlene the Nunu Award for displaying, and I quote, ignorance, arrogance, avarice, short-sightedness, and utter contempt for fish, wildlife, and the public good. Ron Marlene loves to talk about polarization when he talks about the environment, but Ron Marlene is the king of polarization. He has called us fern fairies, fern feelers, prairie fairies, extremists, obstructionists. But I ask you, who is really the obstructionist? Who has obstructed every environmental issue to come into Congress? When Ron Marlene talks about polarization, I will give you an example of what he considers polarization. In 1998, this is what Ron Marlene had to say about wilderness. We can and will shape public sentiment so it'll be politically painful to bring up another Montana wilderness bill. When Ron Marlene talks about wilderness, he doesn't understand what he's talking about. When it comes to recreation, he has the audacity to insult women by saying, the guys with the big wife and the 5 ice cream smeared kids have every bit as much right to prime recreational property as the Atand elitist. I, as a woman, I take offense at such remarks. Ron Marlene does not understand the complexities of wilderness. He does not understand that the decisions about wilderness go way beyond recreation. Wilderness and protecting it is protecting our future, is protecting something for our children. When it comes to the appeals process, Ron Marlene again speaks on both sides of his mouth. He has continually talked down the appeals process. He does not want you, as a citizen of this country, to participate in the decision on your public lands. But Ron Marlene used the same appeals process to protest a timber sale behind his ski chalet, telling the Forest Service to go back and reevaluate wind shear and aesthetic appearance of this sale. Ron Marlene continues to threaten to gut the Endangered Species Act. He has no understanding of what this act stands for. For him, he thinks that the Endangered Species Act was brought in to take away jobs from people. He does not understand what it stands for. Endangered species are our indication of when we are dangerously upsetting the balance of nature, and it's a warning to us that we need to really look at the issue and to look to the future and to protect species aside from the economic value. Let me give you a few other examples of how Ron Marlene has voted on the environment. How many of us as mothers and women want clean air and clean water? But Ron Marlene voted against the Clean Air Act. He voted against the Clean Water Act. He has voted against federal protection of wetlands, describing them as mud puddles in the West. Ron Marlene voted down the protection of the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, again standing on the side of oil, industry, and other development. He also voted against protection of the Yellowstone geothermal features. He also voted against providing stream access to fishermen. He voted against inclusion of critical habitat in the Wild and Scenic River Act. Let me give you a few instances of where he's voted yes. He's voted yes to oil exploration in the Bob Marshall Wilderness. He voted yes to amend the California Desert Protection Act to reduce the amount of wilderness there. And this is probably even the most disgusting thing of all. Ron Marlene voted yes to allow liquid tankers hauling milk and orange juice across the country to, on their return trips, haul hazardous and toxic chemicals. Ron Marlene comes to the end of our rally, and I'd like to thank you all for being here. There are well over 100 supporters here of our rally. I want to thank you for coming out. I know it's cold. And
Bradley meant.
What's that? Oh, okay. I have one announcement to make before we go. Those of you who would like to meet the pro-choice candidate for Governor, Dorothy Bradley, Tuesday, October 13th, the Library Mall, University of Montana. Anyway, thank you all for coming today. Don't forget to vote in November, and vote Ron out.